Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about the extreme and completely understandable level of frustration that Judge Paula Zinnes expressed in the Abrego Garcia case in a hearing on Friday. Okay, quickly to review the bidding, because I know there are different cases here and it's sometimes hard to keep the scorecard lineup clean and separate, but this is in some sense the big one because Abrego Garcia is the case in which, at least initially, and several people in the administration said, oopsie, our bad. We shouldn't have sent him down there. They have since tried to backpedal in 6 different ways, including most recently looking at an order that Abrego Garcia had that said, whatever you do, do not send this guy to El Salvador where they sent him. And I think they're trying to parse it very finely to say, well, he still could have been deported, just not to El Salvador. And when we left the country, even though there was an order not to return him, that was still okay because we weren't taking him to El Salvador. And by the time we were, he's out of the jurisdiction, some kind of sophistry like that. But there's a bigger thing going on here. So this case goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which holds 7-2. You've got to give him due process. And now that you sent him away, step back. All bad that people have been sent away without due process. But here's a guy who we know shouldn't have been sent there. We know wasn't eligible. So it is an absolute hellish nightmare that he's down there completely incommunicado, except for the one meeting with Senator Van Hollen. And we did a one-on-one with the senator that I recommend to everyone. Pretty short and worth listening to. Besides that, no one has heard anything about him. No one knows what's going on. And this is an innocent man who never should have been sent down. And one of the things the Supreme Court, I think, did Friday was try to light a fire under the administration and make the general point, guys, this is a matter of real urgency. A putatively innocent man has been sent down there and disappeared. You've got to do everything you can to facilitate his return. All right. It came back down from the Supreme Court that basically affirmed what Zinnes was up to, basically affirmed this is bad. Zinnes, get the information that we need to know if the administration has purposely thumbed its nose at the orders. What have they done exactly to try to bring him home? That's your lookout now. But the basic ruling, they're behind her on. And so I think this is about a month ago already, and she's been proceeding slowly and methodically because what she doesn't want to do, she's got a really pretty strong hand to play now with the Supreme Court behind her. And what she doesn't want to do, let's say she finds a violation and orders Pam Bondi hung by her heels for 40 days, for example. Then the Supreme Court likely would say, okay, violation, but you can't hang the Attorney General by her heels for 40 days. In other words, this is Zinnes, wants to really set a good, strong record that says, I gave him every chance. Then I held him in contempt. Even then, I didn't, sock them nearly as much as I could have and the like. So that's what she's about. What the administration seems to be about is just totally flouting her authority. So it came back down and they basically said nothing and said nothing again. When she ordered them to respond with motions, they did motions that, said, today is Monday, have a nice day, that's it. Really completely non-responsive, brazenly non-responsive. Then they kind of teased the court and the ACLU on the other side saying, oh, give us a week. And to all appearances, it was like they were really about to have a breakthrough, restore him, bring him out of the custody, Abrego Garcia, that is, of El Salvador and the nasty prison, where actually right now it's not clear he's in that prison, but he's certainly in El Salvador custody. End of week comes, They got nothing. It was all bullshit. And the court and ACLU went along, but they, fool you once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. They asked for another week. The court said, and hey, now let's hear it. We've got depositions, and they took depositions of 3 people. The depositions, we haven't seen the transcript, but they seem to be complete studies in non-responsiveness and just completely stonewalling of the questions. She has some really basic questions. What did you do to she's got a rule. Have they complied with their obligation to facilitate his return from custody? And if they've done next to nothing, there's then they haven't, and contempt ought to ensue. Okay, so they're doing this discovery that she says will happen fast and within 2 weeks, and they give nothing. And then she has another hearing where she's mad, and lo and behold, as they tried once before in the Boasberg case, state secrets privilege. That requires a finding by one of a few high-level people, in this case, the Secretary of State, personally, Marco Rubio, saying to give this information would be really injurious to national security. This is so screwed up. Typically a state secret privilege is invoked to keep evidence from coming out before the public where any adversary could have it, because it has to be heard by a jury. It is not used, specifically not used to try to keep a judge from hearing evidence. I mean, the whole point when you do any privilege, and privileges, U.S. versus Nixon, et cetera, are limited depending on what's on the other side. There's a balancing test. But in any event, you give the information to the court so the court can determine whether the privilege applies. It's not for the administration to just say, well, we did it, and so that's all. You can't second guess us. Really? What about, you say, the risk to national security? What exactly is the risk? What happened? Give us the nature of things, etc. Now, what did they do here? Nothing. First of all, Rubio does the attestation. He's the head of the State Department. The people who were deposed were all from the Department of Homeland Security. So she says on Friday, this doesn't do anything for you. We've got depositions here. I want to know about them, interpret, etc. I don't care what Marco Rubio, the head of the State Department, did. That's not what's happening before this court. So that seems to be a ruling of law. And then just in general, they proffer this bare bones statement by Rubio. It will injure the national security. And while we haven't heard anything, the responses to the questions that she has every right to ask now, that's what judges do when privileges are invoked, are zip, substanceless, it would appear, and especially based on her anger at the hearing on Friday, that they just repeated no attempt to try to put meat on the bones, to try to explain what the risk to national security is. They just, repeated his bland conclusion, assumed statement of, it would hurt the national security. It would hurt the national security. It appears that they've given her nothing. Okay. And what this is about, it seems to me, is whether, well, first, there's a real issue about whether the administration will say, screw you to any lower court. That is, that they'll take the position, we don't have to follow what lower courts say, just the Supreme Court. They are affirming they would follow what the Supreme Court would say. I think in this case, the Supreme Court would have the back of Judge Zinnes and the Fourth Circuit. Nevertheless, it's already very cheeky if they simply ignore. But then, if that's the kind of posture, she'll hold them in contempt. It'll go up to the Supreme Court through the Fourth Circuit. And, given the way they've behaved, how really contemptuous they've been. She orders things, they ignore her. She orders things, they ignore her. And she has said, we're getting to the bottom of this, and in short order. This is not going to take a while. And this is one of the things the Supreme Court did last Friday, in their opinion, that my Substack is on today. Really important. They've, brought home, you've got you've got a guy who is by mistake down there rotting away. There's some urgency here, administration. Get it together. So, I think she wants to be measured in what the penalty is, and that's a little bit tricky. Do you threaten to throw somebody in jail? Do you just have financial penalties that really don't hurt anybody in the department at all? You just pay them from the taxpayers. What do you do? Because the idea of contempt here is civil contempt to try to force them to comply with the orders to give discovery, be responsive, and the like. But she's going to be careful. She's going to, make her record and then say next time, and I mean it. And maybe once again, she'll say next time, and I really, really, really mean it. And at that point, lowers the boom and contempt. Something similar could be happening in the D.C. District Court with Judge Boasberg. And that's the kind of thing that if you go too far and the Supreme Court pulls the rug out from under you, it's, who knows where things stand then, and it's a humiliation. But I think she has every reason to think that if she's cautious, prudent, moderate in the actual penalties, they'll back her, and then we'll really have things set up. Because the penalty will be in order to enforce compliance. Let's say, it's not out of the question, somebody goes into jail. They stay in jail then until the administration does what they're supposed to do, or whatever penalty she would impose. That's what it would be about. So then it's really, push coming to shove. And if the administration just remains recalcitrant, I think you'll very quickly have emergency relief sought to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court affirm it, say the district court has done it right. And really, then the rubber has hit the road. Supreme Court has made it clear. And if the administration tries to, bob and weave their way around that one, now we know that this big aspect of a constitutional crisis, and I say aspect because I think we're already in a constitutional crisis. I can talk more about that and will later. Really explodes. And we're in, all kinds of historic, roiled waters. So see what happens in Judge Zinnes' courtroom with Abrego Garcia. They're basically, being completely non-responsive. She's going to force the issue, but I think methodically and with prudence, and then it'll set things up to, with a very clear record that they're just not complying with what the Supreme Court, mind you, said. She's not just doing her own. This was the 7-2 decision from the Supreme Court. So it'll be quite the brazen drama if they don't comply with what the Supreme Court says in backing Judge Zinnes up, as I fully expect them to do. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.